Photoshop, do my thinking for me. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm David Bird with Reality Reimagined. I'm an award-winning photographer and Photoshop artist that specializes in fantasy composite art. Today's quick Photoshop tip video is going to be about using AI technology to problem solve in our images. As many folks are stepping into digital photo editing for the first time, they naturally look for AI technology to do some of the heavy lifting for them until they can learn why things work in Photoshop and be able to solve these problems using tools and techniques by hand, doing it themselves instead of letting the computer think for them. So I want to look today to content-aware fill. I want to talk very briefly about how it came into the Photoshops and how I use it on the regular to do a lot of problem solving. And let me say up front, I know how to solve these problems by hand. My OG original Photoshop street cred is not in any danger here, but using AI technology to be able to solve problems more efficiently and more quickly is something that should always be utilized in your everyday work when it makes sense. If you're using AI technology to try to cover your tracks because you don't want to spend time learning why things work in Photoshop, that's where you and I are going to talk about things and have some problems here. So let's dive into the Photoshop and explore content-aware fill and how I'm going to use it to solve a problem I have with one of my images, because apparently I don't know how to frame things very well. So apparently I was so enamored at the beauty of the model, this lovely dress that she's wearing, this beautiful background that she's standing in front of, that I did not pay attention to the framing and composition of this image, and I got her head entirely too close to the top of this document. Now I went through the rest of the images from this series to see if I could find like an inch or two of background material that doesn't have her head in it that I could bring into this scene, use the clone stamp tool and various other tools and techniques to try to blend it all together and match these lines together. I don't have that. I don't have any source material to bring into it. So this is why I need to use content-aware fill. Now, content-aware fill has been around for a very long time in Photoshop. It came out in like Photoshop CS2, CC, blah, blah, blah. And when it first came out, it was amazing technology. They would do a demonstration where it was like a person standing in front of a brick wall and there was a street sign that was bolted to the wall, and they would make a selection around the sign and then use content-aware fill. And Adobe Sensei, the AI of Photoshop, would do a wonderful job replicating the bricks. There would be, some errors in it not matching up entirely, and the person doing the demonstration would say, hey, that's par for the course. It's getting you like 85% of the way there, but isn't that cool? And to us, it was really cool because we would have to do all of that by hand. But within seconds, the AI technology is able to kind of replicate some of those patterns. Adobe Sensei and the AI technology has gotten better with every single iteration of Photoshop. It's gotten stronger and more efficient, and it is something that I turn to try to solve problems like this instead of patting myself in the back saying, nope, I'm not going to use efficiency. I'm going to spend 30 minutes doing it the old way because that's the way it was done in the past. I have no patience for that kind of crap. But when Adobe Sensei, even in this day and age, I'm using Adobe Photoshop CC 2020 right now, not 2021 because it still has bugs in it. Even at this point of the advancement of this technology, there's still going to be potential issues. So it is important to learn why things work in Photoshop. It is important to learn how to solve these problems by hand, utilizing the tools and techniques in Photoshop that you can use your own human brain to solve. But let's look at how close content-aware fill can solve this problem for us. So again, I want to add about an inch or two of space above the model's head so it doesn't feel like she is so compositionally close to the top of the document, and I need it to utilize some of this background material. So the content-aware fill dialog is located under Edit, and it's right here, content-aware fill, but it's not active right now because I haven't made a selection in this image to tell Photoshop this is what I want you to fill in this area of the selection, utilizing some of the background and other elements that it can see in the scene. So let's make that selection. So what I'm going to do is unlock my background layer by clicking this icon so it's now a normal layer. I'm going to hit V for the move tool, and I'm going to bring the image down until I get roughly an inch and a half of space, something that feels good from that thirds perspective, where I've got just enough space up here that it doesn't feel like your head is too close to the edge of the frame. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and flatten this and return it back to just a standard background layer that's locked. So I'm going to come up to layer, down to flatten image. It's going to fill in the checkerboard pattern with white because there's no information there. So it's like, great, we're just going to fill it with white. and you need to do something with this. So let's do that. I'm going to use the marquee tool here to make a selection that definitely captures all the white, but I'm going to bring the selection tool down just a little bit so Photoshop knows that some of this material through here, the backdrop itself, that could be viable information that it needs to source from to fill in this blank. So once that selection has been made, then I can come up to edit, down to content aware fill. This is now an option that I can click, and this will take us into the content aware fill dialog. Now, let me explain a little bit of what's going on in this dialog. Essentially, the basics of it that you'll use 80% of the time. We can see our original selection here. Anything painted in green is Photoshop's way of telling you this is potential material that it is sourcing to fill in this selection. So we can see it's grabbing some of the background. It's also grabbing some of her hair. If we look here to the right, this gives us a live view of what it's actually going to do to fill in this entire area. Now, looking at this view, we can zoom in just a little bit and see as we move around, it did grab some of her hair. It grabbed some of her head and put it at the top. That looks silly. Photoshop, calm down. And then we can also see over here, there's some definite recognizable patterns of that rose that's in the background. So that's kind of a problem. That's an issue with using content aware fill, but there's ways for us to kind of fix that by hand. But let's see how far we can get with the AI technology. So what I want to do to solve first this bizarre cone heads looking thing that it's done to her head is I want to remove some of the green sampled areas. So right now, the basic brush that's active when you come into this dialog is here, and this is the sampling brush tool, or you can hit the letter B for the hotkey to go to this tool. So it's in the reductive mode, as we can see here. So it's going to take away green anywhere I click and paint. So I'm going to immediately start clicking and painting to take away any of the samples that it's making of her hair and of her head. I don't want that to be brought into the options that Adobe Sensei is going to use to potentially source all of this. Then click and let go. This is going to think for a moment, and then we get a different result. That looks a lot better because it's utilizing material from the background itself to try to bring into this scene to add to all of this. But I also want to give it some more options of the background and remove some other elements of the flowers and so forth, just to see if I can help improve the results. So while we're in the reductive mode with the brush, I'm going to go ahead and continue to click and get rid of these little flowers, the edge of the dress. Let's get rid of the flowers over here to make sure it's grabbing none of her hair or the flowers or the props. I just want pure background material. Now I'm going to come up into the additive mode and start painting green in the background areas and just say, hey, you've got a whole bunch of material here, Photoshop, Adobe Sensei. Start borrowing some of that to see what you can come up with your fancy little Terminator Skynet algorithm to fill in that selection. Now let's take a look at the live view and see, once it's processed, what it comes up with. Better. It's a little blurry edge there, but it's giving us more material. It's working in those concentric circles. I don't mind that as much because, yes, this is kind of a little bit of a recognizable pattern, but not nearly as bad as it was when we first started. And if you don't believe me, pause the video and go back and take a look. So I think this is better. I don't like that little recognizable pattern, but this is getting me 75% of the way there. And then I get to use my human brain and the tools in Photoshop that are basic tools and easy to use and understand to solve these problems. So let's go ahead and say that Adobe Sensei is done enough. It's now time for the human to step in. So I'm going to come down to here and click OK. It's going to take me back into Photoshop. And most important, what it has done is made a new layer here that is the filled in sampled stuff that it has copied into this. So if I hit Control or Command and the letter D, that's going to end our selection here. And then if I turn off this background layer, we can see this top layer is what Adobe Sensei filled in the blanks, borrowing all that information. Now, let me just take a moment here. I mean, yes, we can see some recognizable patterns, that there's that blurry section and whatever else. This is pretty impressive. And if it doesn't seem impressive to you, well then, no, it's impressive because if I had to go find a file and grab this much material, it didn't exist. I didn't photograph it. So within seconds, if I wasn't sitting here flapping my gums to you, within seconds, it was able to produce this from nothing. It just sampled the rest of the image and made this. This is a great jumping off point for you, the human being, to step in for the computer and solve the problem and get you the rest of the way there to your final artwork. So let's do that. I'm going to turn on the background layer now, and I'm going to flatten these again by coming up to layer and then flatten image. Now, all I want to do is just try to find some material that I can clone into this weird space. So I'm going to hit S for the clone stamp tool. I want to make sure that the clone stamp tool has an opacity of 100%, a flow of 100%, and that it's sampling the current layer. So I'm going to use the right and left bracket keys to make my brush bigger or smaller. And let's grab some of this material like right here. I don't want to grab material that's right next to the area that I'm about to clone into, because that creates recognizable patterns. But if I grab some material from over here, that's far enough away that hopefully folks don't zoom into this image and go, let's count every one of these little, I see a recognizable, and that's not going to happen. And if that does, then those people are just bored. So clone stamp tool, now you need to hit Alt or Option to tell the clone stamp tool, I want this area right here to be the source that you draw from. So holding Alt or Option, tapping once with my Wacom Intuos Pro tablet and pen. Now I have that source area set. Photoshop is showing me what it looks like inside the brush. So when I start painting, over here, you're going to see a plus sign over here. That's Photoshop's way of telling you this is the source area, and it's going to follow along with me as I go. So again, painting that 100% opacity and flow, I'm just cloning in something new. Now, as you can see, I'm moving over and it's starting to copy her too, so I went too far. So I'm hitting Control or Command and the letter Z to go one step back in my history. And I'm just going to, again, be a little bit more careful this time, making my brush just a touch smaller, being a little more careful how I paint. And now I'm lifting my pen so that it will reset the source area back to that center spot. Lifting my pen again so that we don't run into her and start copying her, because that source plus sign is moving with us as we go. Okay, once we get into it and get things cloned in, there we go. The rest of the recognizable patterns, sure, I can hit Alt or Option, make a new sample area, clone in just a little bit of material right through here. Folks should not be zoomed in paying attention this much to the backgrounds. There we go. Control or Command and the number 0 to move all the way back out. Arguably, I think that little circle that I just painted looks weird, so I'm going to hit Control or Command and the letter Z to go one step back in my history. Done. Yes, there's a few little recognizable patterns in here. There isn't another big rose for us to sample. Are people going to look at that and go, wait, I smell some Photoshop funny business happening here? No, they're not. We used AI technology. We understood how it worked in the dialogue. We understand a basic tool like the clone stamp tool, how to solve the problem the rest of the way using our human brain. Do a color grade, add a texture and a little bit of vignette, problem solved. Again, if we weren't talking, this would have all happened within 2 minutes. So that's the quick tip. Let's finish it up with some final thoughts. To be quite honest with you, there will never not be a time that you need to learn why things work in Photoshop. You need to understand the tools, the techniques, and the processes that you need to follow to be able to get the art that you seek. But if AI can step in and help you with some of the heavy lifting, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, in previous videos on this channel, I have talked about programs like Luminar, the Luminar 4, and now the new Luminar AI, that just all you have to do is paint some lines and say, this is eyes, this is that, and now do your magic. And it does a good job. Don't get me wrong, it does. But that whole system is predicated on you needing to let the AI do 80% of the heavy lifting for everything. And then you step in and do just a little bit of 20% finessing across the entire process. I don't agree with that. I don't think that will ever be a good way to go forward in your photo editing, because once your needs of your imagination and art exceed the AI in its current form and iteration in those programs, what are you going to do? Are you going to just wait for a new version of it to come out? You have to learn why things work in Photoshop. And I promise you, these tools, these amazing results, these beautiful pieces of artwork, they're based upon simple tools, simple techniques, simple steps in Photoshop that have been around since the beginning. There's a reason why those basic new things that came into Photoshop long ago are still some of the most commonly used tools and techniques in Photoshop today to create amazing artwork. Learn why things work in Photoshop and explore the content of where it fell. If you like the content you found in this video today, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel, because new content debuts each week in photography and Photoshop education. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell icon to be notified of that new content when you return to the YouTubes. Thanks so much for watching today, and until next time, I'll see you out there in the world of Photoshop.